Rohan's Corner, Rohan's Corner, that show's awesome, awesome, it's so awesome, oh so awesome, awesome, awesome. Doesn't Rohan's Corner collect GoBots? That would be really late. One of the many robot franchises on his show. He treats them all the same. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. She's got a wall of fame. Awesome.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Rohan's Corner. Thank you to my cohorts for that wonderful introduction as always. And this week I wanted to take you on a trip down memory lane, as I have done so recently when we talked about the Muffy and the Mysterions episode. This time I wanted to talk to you about the origins of Transformers, where they came from. As we all know, Takara were the origins of Transformers. That's where Hasbro licensed the figures from. However, if we look into Takara in a bit more detail, we can see that there were two real underlying lines. There was the Diaclone line, which is where the majority of the Autobot cars and the Optimus Prime and Ultra Magnus figures came from in 1984. However, there's also a Microman subline called Microchange, where a lot of figures came from. And I feel like in Transformers and in the community, we talk about Diaclone a lot, but people don't really talk about Microman or Microchange so much. I guess the two get mashed into one and people focus on the one with more figures, which makes sense, especially considering that Diaclone was a bit more consistent in what it was putting out. However, there are a bunch of excellent figures that came out of Microchange and Microman, and that's what I want to focus on today, to talk to you about some of those, especially some of the unreleased ones, which are very cool and I would love to see come out in either the original guise or an updated version. You know, some of them which I didn't even know about or hadn't even realized existed until I started doing a little bit more digging. So let's go into it, shall we? Microman was a line of toys that were actually inspired in the late 60s, early 70s by the introduction of G.I. Joe figures from Hasbro. And Takara took it upon themselves to import and license those G.I. Joe figures. See a little bit of semblance of similarity here with the Transformers line into the Japanese market, and started fiddling with it for the Japanese market. And that's where Microman was born from. And there was a combination of sort of little human type figures with little robot figures and the such likes. It was quite eclectic, but underneath the Microman banner, there was a subline called Microchange, and that's where the majority of the Transformers-based characters that we know and love today from Generation 1 for that subline came from. And we think about the types of characters that came from that line. There's Megatron, there's Soundwave, there's Ravage, Laserbeak and Buzzsaw, Frenzy and Rumble. And then we have all the G1 Minibot Autobots, specifically Bumblebee, Cliffjumper and Bumper came from that line. As we know, the Mysterions line got incorporated, somehow wrapped up into that line, and we got Gears and Windcharger, Brawn and Huffer from those as well. And then there were a bunch of other bits that we got there. We got Reflector in that line from Microchange. Soundwave came along later as MC10. And at the same time, there were a few coming out later in 1984, which were the likes of Perceptor and Blaster, which obviously made their way into the movie in 1986, and also the G1 Season 2 in 1985. Now, in addition to all of these characters that we know and love, there were additional figures that we never got to see in the Transformers line, which I think were pretty cool, especially the likes of Browning, who many of you will know as an alternate Megatron or an alternate gun-shaped robot. But at the same time, there was also alternates to the Walther PK-38, because while that was the basis for the Megatron mold, there were a Smith & Wesson gun, there was a Magnum gun, there were other types of weapons that were done for this line which actually were probably just as good as Megatron if you look at them. But Hasbro chose Megatron as the leader of the Decepticons and didn't choose to import those other figures into the line in any way, shape or form, which is a bit of a shame. At the same time, we had a few extra cassettes, Jet Heli and Battle Bike, which are some awesome looking cassettes, especially Jet Heli. I love the look of that thing. I really do wish these would be released subsequently, made again as part of a reissue series, or maybe in a Generations line, update them and bring them back like they've done with the G1 original cassettes and original characters. And actually within the Microman line itself, there was a 3-pack of micro robots, 3 different lines, I can't really call lines, sub-figures of micro robots, of which my favorite is Bull Sonic, who looks absolutely fantastic as a robot and as a jet. And I'm not, again, sure why this figure wasn't incorporated into Transformers. For whatever reason, they didn't pick it. A couple of other figures that didn't make it into Transformers were the Watch Robos that many of us may have had. I certainly had a couple, me and my brother. And the Binoculars Robo, which wasn't very popular. I don't see very many of them. It's quite rare today. And there were obviously some variants of some of the figures, like Perceptor came in his black Magnificus version, the Diaclone one that everyone talks about, as well as Blaster coming in a multitude of different colors, a blue blaster, a red blaster, etc, etc. And then in 1984 they started to go down a different route for micro change. They started to create things called the Meteor bots, which is pretty much what it sounds like. They have a lot of similarities with what the Mysterions were doing. They were just little round balls or meteors that transformed into robots. And then they started doing Lockbots as well. Again, the similarities with Mysterion's range. So we're not 100% sure. Maybe some of these were incorporated from the Mysterion's line. I don't know. And there was an unreleased figure called Beam Robo who looked really cool. He could be almost a precursor to Shockwave to an extent, that sort of shape of alternate mode. So loads and loads within this line. And I feel like it's underappreciated. I don't know how you all feel about it. Did you know about all of these figures, especially the ones that were never brought into Transformers? Would you like to see more incarnations of these being brought back to life, either in their original guise or an updated version, like I said? And you know, where would it have gone? I mean, if we look at what happened to the micro change line, there were subsequently a load of Zone and Victory type figures that were released, but a lot of them had human counterparts or G.I. Joe style action figures to go with them. And so the line became slightly different. This is when obviously Transformers started to take off, and so it became a different kind of focus. Ultimately, Microman and Microchange all got wrapped up into Diaclone, and obviously Diaclone continued to produce more and more figures which were eventually incorporated in some which way into the Transformers series. But a lot of these unreleased ones I think are still really cool. I hope that's been informative. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Rohan's Corner. Hopefully you've seen something that you've never seen before. Who knows? Anywho, thank you for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Back to the studio.
Transformers, Rohan's in disguise.